The Krangled event was, in many ways, everything I've been waiting for. A brand new tree and a fresh start to a league. The kind of event I really wanted. But in other ways, it was also really lacking. The lack of a solo self-found hardcore option, and also having a completely blind progression tree. And I don't really agree with the decision making behind that. Thankfully now though, Team Focus has actually made a POB for actually a solved tree. That said, the character I made here was built without using the POB, although I've now reworked what I want to do with the POB to make a much stronger character for what I think will be a pretty fast run to Exarch and Eater. My guess is that my run will probably take around 8 to 10 hours, but we'll see how things actually play out when I start tonight. In short though, I'm a cold DoT Chieftain, and Chieftain is really weird here. All the Ascendancy nodes have been shuffled around, and in this case I get a mix of Quartz Infusion from Raider, First Strike Last to Fall from Champion, and the damage and res node from Necromancer, giving you a really good baseline of a character. I'll go over some of the details for the character right now, and I'll sum my thoughts on the league later. First things first, if you want access to this version of POB, there's a Reddit thread posted by Team Focus. You might know them from Havoc's really fast level 100 pushes on League Start. But this particular project was led by Ifan, who, managed to coordinate probably one of those crazy 48-hour information gathering sessions we've ever seen in Path of Exile. You can see that the entire tree is super weird, and this is the full reveal. This is what I think we should have been given at the start of the event, so that we wouldn't have had so many people quitting on day one after realizing how bad blind decision making with the Path of Exile tree can feel. That said, with this solved, it's still pretty hard. The big thing to note is that you don't have a lot of increased damage on your tree. If you think about how you'd path to a really important node, usually you have a bunch of small incremental damage nodes that lead into a big damage node, and then a mastery that pairs with that. Instead, this tree just has a bunch of really useless small travel nodes, although you can mitigate this if you're able to farm out cluster jewels. The thing to note is that this event is only up to Exarch and Eater. You can probably play beyond it, but in the context of an Exarch and Eater push, you're looking at maybe, 10 hours of gameplay for a relatively fast player. That means the types of constraints and the types of optimizations you're looking to make are much different than what you'd be looking for in, say, an Uber race. In my opinion, for this kind of event in the core league, there's basically 4 strong builds. Cold DoT, DD Ignite, Poisonous Concoction, and Bone Shatter. I think most of the Trapper builds probably aren't quite as fast, and there's nothing that comes to mind as being quite as competitive. And even something like Spark is actually quite a bit slower. Those 4 things that I've listed have really good strong scaling at a baseline. Fire DoT might also be a 5th competitor there, but I haven't really figured that out. If you want to see a relatively fast Fire DoT run though, I uploaded one really recently. That was a sub 7-hour Exarch kill, and that was an SSF hardcore. Anyway, let's get to this build. Ascendancy nodes first, so they're really scrambled up, but basically I want to be going firstly for First to Strike Last to Fall, which gives you a ton of damage, move speed, cast speed, it's everything you want. This node alone I think is worth almost 2 Ascendancy nodes in this kind of event. The second thing I look for is Commander of Darkness, which gives you again increased damage, all res, more turbo speed for your increased mapping speed. These 2 things alone give you all the baseline damage that you need. Then I look to get Quartz Infusion because permaphasing is really valuable, especially on Cold DoT, which wants to put you in the middle of packs when you're using Vortex. And the last one I'd probably go for is Val Bastion. Just a heads up, I don't have the skilling set up, but if you look at my current character on my profile, you will see the skill gems that I am using. Also naked gear because, fast event, you're rushing everything, you're basically just naked. The tree itself, I start by going down. Over here you have some AoE nodes and a Dex notable. Attributes on this tree are really lacking in the same way that increased damage is. Eldritch Battery is the first keystone I'm going for, but it's not something I rush. Instead, early on, I actually go for Firewalker, because I'm going to be leveling with Rolling Magma, linked with Onslaught and Ellie Prolift that I meal off of the Templar. I go over down here for Acrimony and DoT Multi. I actually do path over here for Elemental Overload to help you out early. Once you grab this, the rest of it is all travel all the way until you actually make it over to Snowforge, which is the next big node that I'll be taking. I might also go for Sentinel early because, some Ellie res is really powerful, and you get all res here as well. So 14% for 2 nodes, real good. Snowforge, though, is a pretty powerful node. Just a ton of damage from this alone. And then I also want to grab Arcanist Dominion and Cold Hearted. These are really important because I'm going to be leveling as a spellcaster. You're really lacking intelligence. Once I grab this, I'm going to be pathing path up for practical application, and then over here for onslaught and kill. After that, you path over to Ranger Start, which is probably the best generic starting on the tree. Gives you a mix of Divine Judgment for 50%, and you also have Stormweaver for another 25% and a -5 res if you have Shock, which I will be using probably with a Focus Shock Ring, maybe Skitterbots at some points during the campaign. Pathing up here, I've just been in training, but not a lot of useful travel nodes other than this. The most important thing though is to get over here, where you get Reservation Efficiency, Charisma, Season of Ice, which is one of the only good notables for a Cold DoT build, Blast Radius for AoE, and the sort of coup de grace for every single build this patch, Whispers of Doom, giving you double curse and all the single target they'll need. After that, we'll be pathing over here for Holy Dominion, all res, max res from Prismatic Skin, and then another int node. Based on a 4 link and level 18 gems, I'll have roughly 300 to 400k DPS as I enter the Exarch and Eater bosses. My initial run through felt pretty good, but instead of this tree, I went through over here, which lacked pretty much everything. The only thing that this area was giving me was actually access to Magebane and more suppression, which isn't really important on an SSF run. Having some suppression is enough to mitigate during maps. If I get one shot, I take the time out, go get a drink. All in all, this is a pretty cool event. I wish we had much more time though to play around with it. This really should have been the 4-week event instead of Ruthless with Gold. I think there were so many different optimizations to go for, and it would have been really fun to farm out a long character. I mean, look at some of these ascendancies now. Look at Guardian. It's got Sanctuary of Thought, which I think is the best ascendancy node in the game, in the end game. One step ahead, paired with that, are you kidding me? I mean, the options were just so cool. I just wish we had this resource earlier and wish we had this event for longer. Anyways, I'm going to be uploading a full Spark run in SF Hardcore pretty soon. That was about 7.5 hours on a self-cast Hierophant, which I think might be the way to League start Spark next league.